If your stereo is capable of producing two lows, you must have noted that there are many recordings that lack real deep lows. Turning the bass up doesn't solve that. You can't boost what's not there. The Mini Subharmonics creates those deep low tones based on the lows in the recording. Since it's such an unusual device, let's first see here where it finds its place in a stereo. You first need a source with analog outputs. The Mini Subharmonics only has analog inputs and outputs. In this example, let's use a network player and connect that to the inputs of the Mini Subharmonics. Its outputs are then connected to a line level input on the amplifier. A pair of speakers are then connected to the speaker outputs of the amplifier. If you have a subwoofer, that is also connected to the amplifier. Of course, you can use any source with line level analog outputs like a CD player or analog or digital tape recorder. If your amplifier has a tape monitor input and a rack out, and you don't need that for a tape recorder, you can connect the Mini Subharmonics to that. This is called sidechain. The rack outs of the amplifier are connected to the inputs of the Mini Subharmonics using RCA cables. The output of the Mini Subharmonics are connected to the tape in, also called tape monitor inputs. On the amplifier, you select the tape input, sometimes named tape monitor input, and leave it in that position the whole time. The regular input selector lets you select the source you want to use. In this setup, you can easily switch between sources using the input selector on your amp, while keeping the Mini Subharmonics in the loop. The Mini Subharmonics is housed in a simple box with rounded sides. Including knobs, it measures 102 mm deep, 73 mm wide and 25 mm tall. It weighs 0.19 kilograms. On one side we find the gain setting called volume. That lets you adjust the optimal operating level. Then we get two analog inputs and the volume setting for the sub-low. On the other side we find the 12-volt power input. The designer let me know that any DC voltage between 9 and 14 volts will work. The simple Warwood 12-volt DC 1A switch mode power supply comes with the Mini Subharmonics. The red LED indicates the presence of power. The two LEDs next to it show overload when the volume knob is set too high. The left and right outputs are found here. Inside we find a circuit board that holds the connectors and potentiometers, while the power input is mounted on the backplate. On this circuit board we also find a 5-volt regulator and two transistors that can amplify the signal. On the piggyback mounted DSP board we find a 3.3 volt regulator for the digital section. The clock oscillator is situated here, close to the analog device's ADAU 1401. This is an analog to digital converter, a DSP and a digital to analog converter in one. This has the advantage that both the AD and DA converter is clocked by the same oscillator. That makes it fairly free of jitter artifacts, since timing aberrations are identical on both sides. The DSP program is stored in this EEPROM. I have already described how the Mini Subharmonic should be connected. The only thing left to do is set the volume, which sets the internal gain so the AD converter gets sufficient signal without overloading, and set the sub level. And here a warning might be in place. The Mini Subharmonics generates energy in the 10 to 40 Hz region, based on signals higher up in the band. Your loudspeakers must be able to reproduce such low frequencies, and your amplifier must be able to produce sufficient power to support that. Remember that every octave down needs double the power. Forcing small loudspeakers to reproduce very low frequencies might not produce bass while a large current might overheat the voice coil of your woofer. I used my setup 2 for the listening test. The source was the Volumio Motivo streamer with S-Booster BOTW PMP Eco MK2 9V power supply. The Motivo was connected to the network over Wi-Fi to the TP-Link XE756E access point, which was connected over fiber to my modem/router and so to the internet. Its line outputs were connected to the Mini Subharmonics using Siltec London RCA interconnects. The outputs of the Mini Subharmonics were connected to the analog inputs 1 on the Arcam Radia A25 amplifier over a pair of Grim Audio RCA interlinks. The amplifier drives the Acoustic Energy Radiance 1 loudspeakers, which are placed on target speaker stands with Stack Audio AVAA 50 isolators instead of spikes. Kimber 4PR speaker cable was used for the connection. The REL T5 subwoofer was connected to the speaker terminals of the Arcam using the cable supplied with the subwoofer. Music was coming from the small green computer Sonic Transporter i7 CDR running Roon server. There's no such thing as a free lunch. In general, digital signal processing will have some impact on the sound quality. To what degree that will be noticeable depends on the qualities of the algorithm, the processor, and the stereo used. So it's a matter of balancing between budget, having deeper lows, and the influence of the processing. The unit retails for €199. We've seen it uses the ADAU 1401. When bought at volume, it can be had for under $5. That doesn't necessarily set expectations very high, so let's see how it sounds. Comparing the sound of the direct output of the Motivo against the Motivo with the Mini Subharmonics in the chain, the direct sound is more balanced and open. The sound over the Mini Subharmonics is also somewhat sharper. But please watch this chapter till the end, for there is a solution. When the sub-sound was dialed in, it did give the music more bottom end, which is an engaging feel. I'm a fan of Mad Dogs and Englishmen by Joe Cocker. Great music, but missing the bottom end. I still prefer the direct feed from the Motivo. Then I tried the Mini Subharmonics powered from the S-Booster BOTW PMP Eco MK2 12V linear power supply. That sounded quite a bit better, even so that I liked the overall sound over the Mini Subharmonics better. There was a stereo image and resolution close to the direct sound. With the sub-level carefully set, and that takes some albums to dial in, the music sounded more live, more evolving. When designer Hans Scholte brought the Mini Subharmonics to my attention, he wrote, and I quote, "The device arose from a specific frustration. I noted that my subwoofer usually had nothing to do with a lot of music, and certainly with the recordings from the 80s. The deep frequencies are simply missing from the mix. To solve this, I developed my own DSP unit that restores the missing octave 10 to 40 Hz in real time." End of quote. It's not only music from the 80s. Many albums that were recorded on analog tape suffer from this, since tape recorders roll off on the low end with 60 dB per octave from a frequency chosen by the recorder manufacturer. It's a choice between low end extension and signal to noise. Apart from that, many tape recorders suffered from tape head resonance, also called head bump. That had influence on both amplitude and phase on the problem frequency. The so-called butterfly heads solved this to some degree, but were expensive. By the way, the often used directional microphones, being pressure gradient receivers, also drop 6 dB per octave from a frequency chosen for signal to noise. But back to the Mini Subharmonics. Please realize that your loudspeakers or subwoofers need to be able to reproduce the lows generated by the Mini Subharmonics. As already mentioned, your amplifier must have sufficient power too. If you have a stereo comparable to my setup 3 plus sub, you'll find the use of the standard power supply sufficient. If your stereo is more like my reference setup 2, I would invest in a better power supply. And if your stereo is more like my setup 1, you might not want to use the Mini Subharmonics. See the link in the top right corner, at the end of the video and in my description for more on my reference setups. I reviewed this product because I found it an interesting approach. It's typical cottage industry. The first series was only 16 pieces. It can be ordered in the Netherlands from Marktplaats and internationally on eBay. And on that bombshell, we come to the end of this video. A new one is coming soon, so don't forget to subscribe or follow me on Patreon, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram or TikTok. Patreon and YouTube Premium members get early access and no ads. A huge thank you to everyone that supports the channel financially. It's great to see the increasing number of small donations. Please don't be shy. I appreciate every single euro, pound, dollar or equivalent you donate. You keep me independent and motivated. It's easy to contribute using the QR code on screen or the links in the description. I'm Hans Beekhuizen. Thank you for watching, and whatever you do, enjoy the music.